Good evening and welcome. My name is Neil Harvey. You're watching RT International. The Pentagon has confirmed American troops are now involved in the frontline fight against Islamic State in western Mosul in Iraq.
The West Mosul operation, as you know, has been underway in terms of isolating the area for some time now. We are very close to it, if not already engaged in that fight.
Let's cross now to our Washington correspondent, Gane Chichikan. Good to see you, Gane. What more can you tell us then?
Neil, the U.S. military now indicates that American troops will be on the front lines in Mosul as they're trying to drive ISIL out of the western part of the Iraqi city. The spokesman of the U.S.-led anti-ISIL operation, John Dorian, was quoted as saying U.S. forces now go as close as they need to get. The military still refers to the troops as advisors, but their latest statement suggests that they could be in combat there. Take a listen to what the top U.S. commander in Iraq, Lieutenant General Stephen Townsend, had to say.
It is true that we're operating closer and deeper into the Iraqi formation, so we adjusted our posture during the East Mosul fight.
For a long time, the Obama administration had refused to say U.S. troops in Iraq were in combat or referred to them as boots on the ground, even though many pressed the former administration on the accuracy of the official description of the mission being train and assist, whereas, for example, the Stars and Stripes military outlet published pictures of U.S. troops on the front lines in Iraq. Here's what military officials under the Obama administration said just a few months ago.
It's the Iraqis in the lead. The Iraqis are at the front, and Americans are providing in their advisory role, but they are behind the forward line of troops, and they are providing that same sort of advice and assistance that they have in Iraq previously.
We're executing the Iraqi plan, and the Iraqi plan is that the only ones going in there right now, there is no plan for coalition forces to go in there, and the Iraqis have said it's just going to be their forces.
Clearly a different picture right now. The Trump administration appears to be more forthcoming on the role that U.S. troops will play in the fight against ISIL in Mosul. We may see a little less of the verbal acrobatics that we saw during the Obama administration. By the end of the month, the new Defense Secretary James Mattis is expected to present his plan to defeat ISIL, so we'll see. The new plan could potentially expand America's role in the fight in Iraq.
Gane, many thanks. Our correspondent Gane Chichikan live from Washington. Meanwhile, the US has already suffered a combat death in the Mosul offensive. It was back in November when a service member died of wounds after a roadside bomb exploded. Experts that we spoke to warned the new decision to put US troops on the front line could see many more soldiers returning in body bags.
We're not talking about huge numbers currently in Mosul. I've been talking to colleagues over the phone today who are on the front line in Mosul now, and they're telling me that it's scores of American soldiers. You're talking 50, 60, 70 soldiers on the front line. So that raises the obvious question, is this a sort of test of some sort? Is this a litmus test to see how much you can get away with in terms of American soldiers, in terms of involvement and actually getting boots on the ground? You know, we've got people now on the front line who possibly could be fired at. So I think that's one thing that we need to take into account.
There might indeed be blowback. I mean, they've gone into Iraq how many times now? 3, 4? I lose count. And every time they then do have to withdraw, and chaos seems to follow in that wake. And of course, even the rise of ISIS itself came about because the Americans did indeed withdraw under Obama from Iraq. If there are indeed American deaths, even before President Trump has actually authorized formal increased involvement in Mosul, I think also that West Mosul is going to be an incredibly difficult nut to crack. Because it's a very ancient city, lots of small alleys, the armoured vehicles can't go down these very narrow alleys, so it's very much going to be hand-to-hand urban fighting all the way through. And of course there is a possibility that even though there are only about 2,000, I think, estimated ISIS fighters within this very large part of Mosul, that there will be booby traps, there will be collateral damage, there will be civilian deaths. American lives are seen to be lost in this first wave of attacks.
With the fighting only expected to intensify in Mosul, human rights organisations are already raising the alarm over the humanitarian catastrophe that's unfolding there.
We estimate right now that there are between 750,000 and 800,000 civilians who are in Western Mosul. We're deeply concerned about the risks that they're facing. We're concerned that they may be used by ISIL, by Daesh as human shields. We know that if they try to escape, Daesh is likely to target them. We're worried that families could step on booby traps. The situation is dramatic. When the fighting reaches neighborhoods, the families that are living there are going to be at extreme risk.
It's been, a very serious situation for the civilians within Mosul itself. Right now, their sort of supply lines are cut, so it's deteriorating quite significantly in terms of humanitarian needs. Even with the civilians that are fleeing from Mosul, they're in a very desperate state. They're having to cross front lines, and they're coming with nothing but the clothes on their back. So it is sort of urgent humanitarian need when we see this displacement coming from Mosul.